Woo! Some Canadians say that Alberta's the Texas of Canada. So I present the Alberta Instruments Brain 2020, an SD card drive that is compatible with the Texas Instruments Compact Computer 40. Now let's have a look at this device. I put it inside a KKSB Arduino enclosure. Very nice little enclosure made out of steel, stainless steel, and plain steel. This enclosure is designed to fit a standard Arduino Uno as well as an Ethernet module. So I did need to modify it a fair bit to fit a SD card reading data logger module so that I can use SD cards with the Compact Computer 40. Some of the modifications include milling out the slot that I can stick the SD card into. I have to mill out this opening on top to fit a ribbon cable that we can now attach like so. And on the bottom, I drilled and tapped some holes to fit a 9-volt battery holder. Let's take this thing apart. Two screws release the innards. There's two. There's the inside. Arduino, data logging shield, 9-volt battery holder. Jim Brain of Retro Innovations is a very talented individual. He studied the HexBus protocol and programmed the Arduino, this Arduino, to work with the HexBus interface, which is this pin header. Very interesting in that the HexBus is digital, however it is controlled with 4 of the analog lines of the Arduino. There's a couple other lines. We have a ground line that connects to it. We have a handshake line. The handshake basically tells when data is being sent or not. And there's also a bus ready line, which just indicates that everything is connected properly. 4 analog lines needed to be used because HexBus is actually 4-bit parallel in its interface. It's not serial, it's 4-bit parallel, a nibble. I'll be certain to put a link below the video to Jim's webpage. And I also put a link to the AtariAge forum, web forum. It's like 20 pages already, computer community members. All of their challenges and triumphs in finally getting this damn Compact Computer 40 to be useful. Now I have a soft spot for this computer, partly because it's an underdog. It's an underdog that really just failed to launch. Texas Instruments produced this computer in 1983, and at the time it was a very nice implementation of a basic 8-bit microcomputer. It had a very solid basic language implementation, decent memory for the time, like 6 kilobytes standard, upgradable to 18 kilobytes internally, and then externally if you put a card in there, I think that you can get it all the way up to above 32 kilobytes, which for 1983 was a lot of memory. The other thing that was very cool about it is that it had this very forward-looking HexBus interface. Now HexBus is the spiritual ancestor of USB. Prior to USB, there was a multitude of I/O formats. You had RS-232, you had Centronics parallels, you had cassette tape interfaces, you had just all sorts of different interfaces. What they all had in common is that, well, they weren't common. They were for specific uses. They were to connect a printer or to connect a modem or something like that. And they all allowed only one connection at a time. This HexBus interface, on the other hand, was one bus to rule them all. Just like USB, this HexBus would be chainable. You can connect multiple peripherals to it, operate them all at the same time, and the peripherals that were planned to be made were really variable. They were going to make some storage options. There were a couple different printers actually did make it to the manufacturing stage. They even were going to make a display adapter so that you can get around this tiny little one-line display. And that would have been very neat if that actually came to market, but never did. Now, sadly, Texas Instruments decided to turn their back on personal computers. They decided to just take a different corporate direction, I guess, and that left this computer stillborn. It's stillborn because with no storage option, with no ability to store your programs, hardly anybody adopted this computer. Yeah, so this doomed the CC40 to irrelevance. Now, fortunately, though, for modern vintage computer collectors such as ourselves, it's a boon. There are all sorts of CC40s on the used market that are in mint condition and often new old stock in the box. If you want for a reasonable price to get a vintage computer new old stock, this is probably the cheapest option to get. And this one here is a new old stock one. You can see it's in beautiful condition. Now finally, a storage solution is in sight. And being SD cards, it's easy to transfer the programs that you download off the internet onto your CC40, or make programs on your CC40, stick it on here, stick it into your laptop, and up onto the internet she goes. I think it would be really retro cool if the CC40 community, if there is actually even such a thing as a CC40 community, can reactivate and make a 2020s revival of this little computer. That would be very neat. Here's a little program I made last autumn. It's kind of like MS Paint for this computer. You can see, maybe, that there's a little dot flashing, and that is your cursor. You can move the cursor by using the arrow keys, and you can set a cursor into make it a pixel or blank the pixel by pressing the spacebar. Let's just try making a diagonal line. Click one there, move down, move right, down, right, down, right, down, right. You'll notice that this here is the hexadecimal code that's required to produce that character. You can make a total of 7 characters across the screen. All you need to do is just move the cursor over to the next field, and you can start editing there. Here, let's just make a hyphen. There's a hyphen. If you want to get rid of it, you can just press clear, and that deletes the current character you're working on. And you can press the Q to quit. Now, anyone with the wherewithal can get themselves an Arduino, a data shield, a handful of electronics, and whip this together, program it, and have their own way of storing programs from this computer. Now, unfortunately, I'm not sure that many people have the wherewithal to do this. Now, I'm considering making a small run of these, perhaps 10 or so, depending on how much interest there is. Now, as each of these requires really quite a bit of handwork, I got to machine slots, I got to machine the surface, I got to drill holes, I got to tap holes. That's a lot of hand soldering. Hopefully you understand that my price is not going to be inexpensive. I'm aiming for around 200 American dollars. Yeah, let me know in the comment section below if you're interested so I can gauge whether or not to begin ordering parts for this project. If I do go through with it, I'll make sure I notify you in the comment section below. Within a couple of weeks, I'll make a decision whether I'm going to make a run of these or not. In the meantime, there's room for vintage computers, and there's room for tools. See you next time.